I mean, I was surrounded by, mountains and water and forests and glaciers and animals and wind and rain and sun and earthquakes. And it was the ultimate connection to our natural world, physically, mentally, and spiritually. But one of the things that really impressed me was this, of how I saw the glaciers melting. And this was 2014, so, it's been 10 years since then. We learned a lot more about glacier melting, and just that's become much more in our awareness. But at the time, I remember taking a hike out. I was in Girdwood, which is about 40 miles south of Anchorage, and then about 10 miles away was a little town called Portage. So I remember there was a hike out to Byron Glacier. Has anybody ever done that one? You've been to Alaska? Well, I'm not even sure. I mean, it's still a hike, but the first year I did it, 2014, I hiked out there. The glacier was way up there, and it was down right there at sea level, right there. And we could walk on this glacier, and there were parts like, don't walk there, you might fall through, that kind of thing. So the next year I went out with like my son or something. It was nowhere near sea level. It was way up. There was also a state park there called Exit Glacier, and it's down by Seward. And it has a trail that you walk up to the glacier, but all along the trail are these little signs that say how far the glacier has receded. You've been there.
Yeah.
It's the most telling thing about global warming. It's just total evidence that global warming is such a real existing thing. So, I only knew what I was hearing in passing or reading in the news. But, while I'm out there just experiencing nature in my own kind of way and feeling this connection and just kind of learning about how this impacts all the people around me, I would say that greater minds were at work in the world. In the 1980s, global temperatures were increasing sharply. In 1988, the UN established the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And they were assembled to bring scientific minds together from all over the world and study climate change and the impacts on humanity and politics and economies. Several studies, treaties, and world agreements would happen with the US being in and out over the next 15 to 20 years. And in 2015, the Paris Climate Agreement was signed by 197 countries to reduce carbon dioxide emissions in order to limit the temperature rise of the Earth to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which was this threshold that was agreed upon to reduce the risk and the impact of climate change to the world. In 2016, the United States pulled out of that treaty, but we rejoined it again in 2021. So we are back in. But this is how things have gone. We've gone back and forth in these world and global relationships. In 2018, Greta Thunberg started striking for climate justice. She's a schoolgirl in Sweden. And since then, Greta became a household name in the quest for climate justice. Why does it all matter? Why do we even care about global warming and climate change? I have a slide.
You don't live on the ocean.
Did I get it? There we go. Climate justice is rooted in recognizing that climate change is causing a multitude of detrimental social, economic, health, and other impacts on vulnerable communities, most of whom have contributed the least to the climate crisis. Low-income countries, people of color, indigenous people, women, and people with disabilities are more exposed to the devastating impacts of climate disasters such as floods and wildfires, severe drought and soaring temperatures, as well as rising sea levels and limited access to food and water. Vulnerable people don't have the same access to the financial resources or the capacity to adapt to the impact of climate change or to recover from the losses and damages that the climate change is pursuing upon them. So here's an example of the implications of some of the abuse that has happened to our planet. In the United States alone, 500,000 school days are missed annually due to pollution from burning fossil fuels. So that means sick children mean parents have to stay home. That means parents have to miss work. And now they miss out on wages and they are at risk for losing their job. People who live closest to industry sites that emit toxins in the air pay a heavier price than those who live elsewhere. So climate change adds to the cycle of poverty. There's a strong justice component here. People most affected by climate change are also those most affected, as I said, by poverty, by racism, and other forms of injustice. So something that we can do is center climate resilience and adaptation in our other justice work. For example, if we build low-income housing, we should make sure that it has solar panels and heat pumps and other climate-ready solutions. And if we participate in helping a food bank, we should focus on local foods that don't have to be transported as far. But most importantly, we should listen and follow the leadership of those that are most affected in the local community. Jesus calls us to care for the least. Working to alleviate climate change recognizes that the least in our world will suffer the most from the ravages that are coming. Now, we may have the resources to survive, but others will not. Jesus calls us to care for humanity, to work for climate justice. As United Methodists, we have a personal and a spiritual and a social interest in the care of the earth and the seas and the cosmos. It's not only a gift of creation from God who loves us, it's our grounding. The earth is our grounding. From dust we were created, and to dust we shall return. And this is the place where we build the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, right? So I want to take a moment and look at the words in the book of Job, a selection of verses from chapters 38 and 39, in which God is speaking to Job. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you know. Who set its measurements? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring tape on it? On what were its footings sunk? Who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang in unison and all the divine beings shouted. Who enclosed the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, the dense clouds its wrap. In your lifetime have you commanded the morning and formed the dawn of its place, so it would take hold of earth by its edges and shake the wicked out of it? Have you surveyed the earth's expanses? Tell me if you know everything about it. Can you hunt prey for the lion or fill the cravings of lion clubs? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry to God, move about without food? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the birthing of does? Who freed the wild donkey, loosed the ropes of the onager? To whom I gave the desert as home, his dwelling place in the salt flats? Did you give strength to the horse, clothe his neck with a mane? In the book Green Faith, which is by Fletcher Harper, he writes about these scriptures. And he says this: the book of Job tells us the story of a good man who suffers horribly and tries to make sense of it. Much of the book of Job is about his desperate friends trying to convince him that life doesn't involve suffering, or that it does. It is Job's own fault. Job is remarkably patient, but he reaches a breaking point, and he calls God out, accusing God of ruining his life. And then God's response, which is the longest uninterrupted speech of God in the entire Bible, is unsympathetic and literally wild. God responds to Job not with pity, but with a bold powerful, moving assertion of the deep mystery that lies beyond our existence. God asserts God's position by describing the natural world in great detail, its complexity, its beauty, its intricacy, its majesty. And with these verbal images that invoke different parts of creation, God essentially reorients Job from self-centered to creation aware. That awareness, that recognition with the awe that comes from a genuine reckoning with the earth, saves Job from his own unhelpful self-pity. By describing creation with a fresh, dizzying, multi-perspective vividness, God connects Job with the reality that there is much more to life. More beauty, more complexity, more gloriousness, more strangeness than we can appreciate. And in Job's case, this awe at creation leads to a renewed gratitude for life. Maybe you've had some experiences that have grounded you to a theological connection for creation care and climate justice. And I just thought I'd take a moment and see if anybody wanted to share any of those. Anybody had such an experience?
Backpacking in the Cascades.
The Cascades, yeah. Amazing.
The eruption of Mount St. Helens. Oh, yeah.
Yes. And that video that they show there, it is a testament to the life cycle, isn't it? It's wonderful. Yes.
I've been in Alaska. I spent time in Alaska. I realized the beauty of Alaska.
Amazing.
Also, I'm in Maui. I'm in Maui right now. And the beauty, the grass, the trees. We look at those and say the presence that the trees have and the breeze. It's a part of God. You know, it's like that's what nature is all about. It's representing what God is about, the presence and the beauty of God.
It's amazing. Were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a memory that's special to me of hiking with God as my companion in the Angeles National Forest and seeing the sunset over mountains and the trees.
Amazing. That's beautiful. Well, I want to share with you now a video that takes us a little deeper into the discussion of how the planet has radically transformed in the last 50 years, how we got here and what we can do.